The mansion stood on the edge of the ocean cliffs, glass walls catching the sunlight like diamonds scattered across water. Inside, everything breathed perfection. Marble floors, quiet echoes, the faint hum of wealth. Daniel Morgan, a self-made billionaire known for his cold precision, had left early for a board meeting that morning. His world ran on control, time, and order, everything except the chaos of emotion. Downstairs, Amma, the maid, moved quietly through the corridors. She had been in the Morgan household for only 6 months, a young African woman who carried both grace and sadness in her eyes. She rarely spoke beyond what was necessary. To Daniel's wife, Claire, she was invisible. To the baby, she was warmth itself. The infant, little Oliver, had grown attached to her in ways no one quite understood. Amma cradled Oliver that morning, humming a soft lullaby from her childhood. The sun slipped through the blinds, painting her dark skin in golden light as the baby's small fingers reached for her necklace. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the divide between servant and master, between her world and theirs. Upstairs, Daniel's car rolled back into the driveway earlier than usual. A canceled meeting. He stepped inside quietly, loosening his tie, scrolling through messages. From the hallway, faint humming drifted down the staircase. Not the nanny's usual tune. Something softer, something unfamiliar. He followed the sound without knowing why, each step slower than the last. At that moment, everything in his world of order was about to break. Daniel's footsteps echoed across the marble floor as he moved deeper into the mansion. He wasn't supposed to be home, not yet. His mind was still half in the boardroom, half in the silence of his empty home. But that humming, that gentle lullaby threading through the air, pulled him toward the nursery like a sound from another life. He paused outside the slightly open door. Through the narrow crack, sunlight poured in, glinting off the silver frame of a family photo on the wall. Claire's smile in the picture looked frozen, perfect, untouchable. The sound of the lullaby grew clearer. Daniel frowned. It wasn't the voice of the hired nanny, it was softer, deeper, filled with a strange tenderness. He pushed the door open an inch more. His breath caught. Amma sat in the rocking chair by the window, the baby nestled against her chest. Her expression was one of peace, her eyes half closed as she hummed. Oliver's tiny hand clutched her uniform collar, utterly calm. For a fleeting moment, the scene was angelic, maternal, pure. Yet to Daniel it was unthinkable. His first instinct was shock, not anger, not yet, just disbelief. He stood frozen at the doorway, unable to make sense of what he saw. The hum died on Amma's lips the instant she noticed him. The room filled with a silence so heavy it felt like it could shatter glass. Their eyes met, his full of confusion and authority. Hers, wide with guilt, fear, and something deeper, something heartbreakingly human. The silence after their eyes met was the kind that could swallow sound itself. The humming had stopped. Even the ocean beyond the glass seemed to hold its breath. Amma's arms tightened instinctively around the baby, not in defiance, but in instinct, the ancient reflex of protection. Daniel stepped into the room slowly, disbelief etched across his face. His voice, when it came, was sharp but trembling. "Amma, what are you doing?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She lowered her gaze, shame washing over her like cold water. The baby stirred, sensing the tension, giving a small cry. Daniel's composure cracked at the sound. His son's cry always did that. He looked at the child, then back at her, torn between outrage and confusion. "I wasn't," she began softly, then stopped, her throat tightening. "He wouldn't stop crying, sir. The formula. It made him sick again. He was in pain. I—" Her words faltered. She looked at him, eyes glistening. "I just wanted to help." Daniel's heart thudded. He remembered the sleepless nights, the expensive doctors, the special milk Claire insisted on. None of it had worked. Oliver's tiny body had grown weaker. Yet now, here he was, calm, peaceful, alive in her arms. Still the image of her holding his son that way. It violated every invisible line between them. "You had no right," he said quietly, though the anger in his tone hid something else. Fear. Not of scandal, but of what this moment meant, of what it revealed about him, his wife, his home. Amma bowed her head, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "I know, sir," she whispered. "I'll leave." But as she rose to stand, the baby reached for her again, and Daniel's world twisted into something far more complicated than right or wrong. For hours, the house felt like it was holding a secret. Daniel hadn't spoken since leaving the nursery. He walked out in silence, the echo of Amma's trembling voice replaying in his mind. He had seen something that didn't fit the world he built, something that stripped away the rules he lived by. Amma sat alone in the servants' quarters, staring at the baby monitor glowing faintly beside her. She expected the call, the dismissal, the shame. Yet, deep down, a quiet ache lingered that had nothing to do with fear of losing her job. It was the bond she hadn't meant to form, one she could never explain. When Claire came home that evening, the mansion glowed in the soft amber of sunset. She noticed her husband's silence first, then the tension in his shoulders. "Daniel?" she asked, setting down her purse. "What happened?" He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "I found Amma in the nursery, with Oliver." Claire frowned. "With him? Doing what?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Feeding him." For a heartbeat there was no sound, only the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Claire's face changed. The calm poise cracked like porcelain. "She what?" Daniel nodded once. "I don't think it was malicious," he said quietly. "She said the baby was sick, that she was trying to help." Claire's lips tightened. "Help? By overstepping every boundary imaginable?" She turned sharply toward the hallway. "Where is she?" Claire's heels struck the floor like a metronome of fury. Each step echoed off the marble until it reached the narrow corridor of the servants' quarters. Amma heard her before she saw her. Her breath quickened. She rose to her feet, hands clasped, eyes lowered, the way she always stood when spoken to by her employers. The door swung open. Claire filled the frame, elegant, trembling with disbelief, her voice cutting through the air like glass. Did you feed my child?" Amma hesitated. Her throat burned as she tried to speak. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. "I didn't mean any harm." "He was crying for hours. The milk you left, he couldn't keep it down. I tried everything. He was in pain." Claire's expression hardened. "And you thought you could fix that?" "With what? With you?" The words came out sharp, laced with disgust and heartbreak. "Do you have any idea what you've done? How inappropriate this is." Amma's voice shook. "I only wanted to comfort him." The silence after that line was brutal. Claire took a step closer, her eyes wet but furious. "You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." Daniel appeared in the doorway behind her, unsure whether to intervene. His wife's anger was justified, but beneath it, he saw something else flicker in her eyes. Jealousy. Not of Amma, but of the connection she had seen between the maid and her son. Amma looked at them both, the couple who lived in two different worlds from hers, and felt the weight of her own heart. "Please," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Claire's voice dropped, cold and final. "You'll pack your things tonight." But before she could turn away, Oliver's cry rang out from the baby monitor again, and for a brief second, Claire's composure shattered. The house fell silent after Claire's outburst. The echo of her words, "You'll pack your things tonight," lingered in every room. Amma sat on the edge of her bed, hands trembling, tears rolling soundlessly down her cheeks. The baby monitor still glowed beside her, and through it came the soft, uneven cries of Oliver. Each cry pierced her like a needle. She pressed her palms together, whispering a prayer in her mother tongue, one she hadn't spoken in years. Upstairs, Daniel stood by the window in his study, staring out at the sea. The waves below crashed gently against the cliffs, steady, calm. A cruel contrast to the storm in his mind. He tried to reason it out. Amma had crossed a line, yes, but was it really out of malice? He'd seen the look in her eyes. That wasn't deceit, it was desperation, compassion. And Oliver, his son hadn't looked that peaceful in weeks. Claire entered quietly, her tone still brittle but softer. "I can't believe she did that, Daniel. In our own house." He turned. Maybe she didn't know what else to do. Claire scoffed. "She's not his mother." The words hit him harder than she intended. He sat down, rubbing his temples. "You've seen how sick he's been. Maybe she helped him because we couldn't." Claire shook her head, her voice breaking. "Don't justify it." But as she spoke, Oliver's cries filled the baby monitor again, loud, pained. Claire froze. She looked toward the hallway, torn between pride and instinct. Daniel reached for the monitor, his thumb brushing over the static image of Amma's small room. "He's crying for her," he said quietly. "Not for us." And in that moment, neither of them knew what hurt more. The truth, or what it revealed about the distance between them. Night descended quietly over the Morgan estate. The mansion's glass walls glowed faintly under the moonlight, their reflections trembling across the water below. Claire had retreated to the bedroom, leaving a trail of half-finished words and bottled anger. Daniel stayed in his study, unable to shake the sound of his son's cries echoing through the baby monitor. Every time Oliver wailed, Amma's room light flickered on, and within minutes, the sound would stop. Every time. It wasn't logic that pushed Daniel from his chair. It was something simpler, instinct. He walked softly down the hallway, his polished shoes barely making a sound on the marble. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the nursery diffuser. When he reached the servants' quarters, he hesitated. The door was slightly open, a faint glow spilling onto the floor. He peeked inside. Amma was sitting on the edge of her bed again, the baby cradled gently in her arms. She wasn't feeding him this time, only rocking him, humming that same soft lullaby. Her voice carried through the air like a promise, calm and aching. The baby's breathing slowed, his tiny fingers wrapped around a lock of her hair. Daniel stood there longer than he intended, watching silently. There was nothing inappropriate, nothing strange, just something profoundly human. A connection his wealth couldn't buy, his status couldn't replicate. He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders for the first time that day. Then, quietly, he stepped back from the door, his thoughts a storm of guilt and understanding. When he returned to his room, Claire stirred. "Where were you?" she murmured. He hesitated, then said softly, "Checking on the baby." But in truth, he was checking on something he didn't yet understand, something his heart had begun to question. Morning light flooded the mansion, painting the white walls with gold. But despite the brightness, a heaviness lingered in the air. Daniel hadn't slept much. The image of Amma rocking Oliver still looped in his mind. Not as scandal, but as a riddle he couldn't solve. Who was this woman who had risked everything for a child that wasn't hers? Later that day, while Claire made calls to agencies to find a replacement, Daniel sat alone in his office. His curiosity gnawed at him. With a few keystrokes, he pulled up Amma's employment file. Sparse details. No next of kin, no family contact. Just a note. Arrived from Ghana 3 years ago. Previously employed by a private family who relocated suddenly. He called the agency, keeping his tone even. This is Daniel Morgan. I need background verification on one of our staff, Ama Adu. The line went silent for a moment. Then the agent said softly, "She's had a difficult history, Mr. Morgan. The previous family lost a child under her care, a tragic illness. She took the blame and left the country." Daniel's chest tightened. "So it wasn't neglect?" "No proof of that," the voice replied. "If anything, she was devastated. She never recovered." He hung up slowly, the weight of that truth sinking deep. The way she held Oliver, the fierce protectiveness, the tears in her eyes. It all made sense now. She wasn't overstepping boundaries. She was reliving heartbreak, trying in some small way to heal through another child's life. When he looked up, Amma passed by the window, carrying laundry, her face calm but tired. For the first time, Daniel didn't see a maid. He saw a mother who had lost everything and still chose to love again. The afternoon sun poured through the glass ceiling of the hallway, scattering soft light across the marble floor. The house was quiet. Claire had gone out, and the staff moved silently, aware of the tension that hung like mist. Daniel waited by the terrace doors, rehearsing what to say. He wasn't used to speaking gently. His power had always come from commands, not compassion. Yet today, his voice would have to find a new language. Amma appeared, carrying a small basket of lemons. Her steps halted when she saw him. The moment stretched, two people divided by class, now bound by an unspoken truth. "Mr. Morgan," she said softly, lowering her eyes. He gestured toward a chair. "Sit, please." She hesitated, then obeyed, setting the basket down. For a long while, neither spoke. The sound of the waves filled the silence. Finally, Daniel said, "I know about the family before us. About the child." Amma's hands froze in her lap, her breath caught. You know?" He nodded. "I shouldn't have looked into it, but I had to understand." Her eyes shimmered. "I failed him," she whispered. "I was supposed to protect him, but I couldn't. He got sick so fast, and when they blamed me, I didn't fight. I just left." Her voice broke. "When your son cried that night, I couldn't bear it. I thought, what if I could save one this time?" Daniel's throat tightened. Her pain was raw, unpolished, the kind of truth money couldn't soften. He leaned forward, his tone low and steady. "You didn't fail, Amma. You loved when no one else would. That's not failure." Her tears slipped silently down, glistening in the sunlight. For the first time, Daniel didn't see guilt or mistake. He saw courage. And deep down, he knew his world would never return to what it was before. Evening settled softly over the cliffs, washing the mansion in shades of gold and coral. The sea outside glittered under the fading light, but inside, the air felt sharp. Claire had returned home early, her heels clicking through the hallways. From the terrace, she heard voices, Daniel's and Amma's. She stopped just before the corner, unseen, listening. His tone was calm, gentler than she'd heard in months. She heard him say, "You didn't fail." The words struck her like a blade. That tone, that compassion. It wasn't for her anymore. When she finally stepped into view, the moment shattered. Amma rose instantly, eyes wide. "Ma'am!" Claire lifted a hand. "It's fine," she said coldly. Her gaze flicked between them. "Having a heartfelt talk, are we?" Daniel straightened. "It's not what you think." "I'm sure it's exactly what I think." Her voice trembled, though anger disguised the crack. "You defend her now? After what she did?" Daniel's patience frayed. "She saved him, Claire. You refuse to see it." Claire laughed softly, bitter, breaking. Saved him? You call that saving? She turned to Amma. You should leave. Tonight. Amma's voice shook. Ma'am, please. Go, Claire said, her tone final. Amma bowed her head and hurried away, tears welling. Daniel stood in silence, jaw tight, watching the woman vanish down the corridor like a ghost. Claire turned toward him, eyes burning. You're defending her because you feel guilty, she whispered. You've built a world so cold you can't stand someone showing you what real love looks like. Her words cut deep, but when she stormed off, Daniel didn't follow. He just stood there, staring at the last traces of sunlight, realizing she might be right. Amma packed quietly under the dim light of her small servant's room. The baby monitor on the dresser flickered softly, playing gentle coos from the nursery upstairs. Her hands trembled as she folded the tiny onesie Daniel's son had once clutched in her arms. She pressed it to her chest, breathing deeply. The scent of baby lotion and innocence. It tore her apart. She couldn't stop thinking about the day she'd found him feverish, gasping, crying for help. She had done the only thing her heart told her to do, and it had cost her everything. Her bag was almost full when a soft knock interrupted the silence. It wasn't Daniel. It was the baby's cry. Faint at first, then louder. The sound seemed to pierce through the walls, through her resolve. Her legs moved before her mind caught up. Amma rushed to the nursery, her heart racing. The little boy lay restless, cheeks flushed. She gently lifted him into her arms, humming the same lullaby her mother used to sing in her village. The baby instantly quieted, eyes fluttering closed. His small hand reached up and rested against her cheek, a touch that shattered her restraint. Daniel appeared in the doorway. He watched silently, the golden glow from the hallway spilling across the room. For a long time, he didn't speak. Finally, he said softly, "He only calms when you hold him." Amma froze. "I'm leaving, sir. Your wife—" "I know," he interrupted, his voice strained. "But maybe she's wrong." He stepped closer, eyes filled with quiet torment. "Amma, I don't know what this is, but you've become part of him. Of us." She looked down at the baby, her tears falling silently. "That's what I'm afraid of." The echo of Claire's heels was the first warning. Sharp, measured, furious. Daniel froze where he stood, halfway between guilt and awe, as Amma still cradled the sleeping baby against her shoulder. The soft lullaby lingered in the air like smoke, delicate and haunting. Claire stepped into the nursery doorway, her eyes widening. For a long, heavy second, no one breathed. The afternoon sunlight cut through the tall windows, illuminating the three of them, the perfect family portrait that wasn't meant to exist. Her voice broke the silence. "She's still here?" Daniel turned, his mouth opening, but words failed him. Claire's gaze fell on Amma, then the baby, then the quiet intimacy that filled the room. Every fiber of her body screamed betrayal, even though she knew what she saw wasn't romantic. It was something deeper. Amma immediately lowered her gaze. "Madam, I'm sorry," she whispered. "The baby was crying. I couldn't what? Stay away?" Claire's tone cracked under the strain of restrained emotion. She took a trembling step forward, her voice shaking. "Do you even realize what you've done to this family? To me?" Amma's eyes welled. "I never meant any harm, ma'am. I only wanted him to stop crying. That's all." Claire's anger faltered for a moment. She looked at her son's calm face, his tiny hand still gripping Amma's necklace, a symbol of the bond she could never share. Daniel spoke softly. "Claire, please. She saved him once before, you know that." Claire's shoulders slumped. For a second, the fierce composure broke, revealing the exhaustion of a woman who had tried to hold her world together too tightly. "Then maybe," she whispered, voice cracking, "I'm the one who's failing him. Amma didn't move. The air between them shimmered with unspoken truths. Love, guilt, and the painful grace of forgiveness not yet given. The nursery door closed behind them with a quiet click that felt like thunder. Claire stood near the window, her reflection trembling in the glass. Daniel stayed by the crib, staring at his sleeping son. The tiny heartbeat that had brought their marriage to this impossible crossroads. "Say something," she whispered, her voice thin, brittle. Daniel turned slowly. "What do you want me to say, Claire? That I regret hiring her? That I regret she cared when we didn't see what was happening right under our noses?" Her head snapped toward him. "Don't you dare turn this on me. You think I don't care about my own child?" "I didn't say that," Daniel replied quietly. "But when's the last time you held him? Really held him, not for a photograph or a dinner party introduction?" Claire's eyes glistened. "You think I wanted it like this? I've been trying to run a home, Daniel, to keep our lives intact while you're out there building empires. Someone had to keep the pieces together." "And now the pieces don't even fit anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "Amma filled a space neither of us even realized was empty. Maybe that's not her fault. Maybe it's ours." Claire's lip quivered. For the first time, anger gave way to something raw. Fear. "You sound like you need her." Daniel hesitated. He wanted to deny it, to say it was just about the baby. But the truth lingered between them like a ghost, not love for Amma, but something purer. Gratitude. Connection. The reminder of humanity in a life of polished surfaces and empty rooms. Claire looked away, a tear tracing her cheek. "If I let her stay, everything changes." Daniel's voice softened. "Maybe that's the point." The silence that followed was long and aching. Not defeat, but the fragile beginning of something honest. The day moved slowly, like the house itself was holding its breath. Amma went about her chores quietly, unsure what the new fragile peace meant. Claire had spoken to her with something close to grace that morning, but Daniel's silence since then was heavier than any scolding could be. By evening, the light dimmed to silver. The mansion stood still, except for the faint sound of the baby's laughter echoing down the hall. Daniel sat in his study, staring at a document on his desk. A new employment contract. His pen hovered above the signature line, his hand trembling. When Claire appeared at the doorway, he didn't look up. "You've been quiet," she said gently. "So have you," he replied. She walked in, her heels soft against the Persian rug. "You're rewriting her contract, aren't you?" He finally looked at her. "She's not just a maid anymore, Claire. She's part of our son's story. He sleeps because of her. He smiles because of her. And maybe we breathe easier because of her." Claire's gaze fell to the paper, then to her husband's face. "I know," she whispered, "and that's why you should sign it." Daniel blinked in surprise. Claire smiled faintly, her voice steady. "You were right, Daniel. Maybe we needed her more than we realized, but if she's going to stay, it won't be as someone we look down on. It'll be as someone we trust." He set the pen down, meeting her eyes with quiet admiration. For years they'd lived surrounded by luxury, but starved of humanity. And now somehow, a single act of compassion had changed the rhythm of their lives. Daniel signed the paper. "Then it's decided." Outside, Amma carried the baby through the hallway, unaware that her life, and theirs, had just taken a turn she never could have imagined. The next morning unfolded gently, sunlight gliding over the marble floors, birdsong filtering through the open windows. Amma moved through the house as she always did, her steps soft, her presence quiet. But something felt different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was expectant, like the air before a kind word. As she entered the dining room, she saw an envelope lying neatly on the polished oak table. Her name was written across it in Daniel's careful handwriting. Her heart skipped. She looked around. The house was empty. Claire and Daniel were likely upstairs with the baby. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a letter, brief, written with intention. Amma, what you did was more than an act of kindness. It was an act of love. You became part of our son's life when we didn't know how to reach him. If you'll accept, we would like you to stay, not as staff, but as family. Daniel and Claire. Her vision blurred before she reached the end. The paper trembled between her fingers as a tear fell onto the ink. Family. The word felt too big, too impossible. She looked up at the chandelier's reflection dancing on the polished table and tried to steady her breath. A quiet laugh escaped her, the kind that comes from disbelief and gratitude colliding. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her beyond the uniform, beyond the title of maid. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. Claire stood in the doorway, holding the baby. She smiled gently. "You're crying," she said softly. Amma quickly wiped her face. "I didn't mean to." Claire shook her head. "Don't apologize. You've earned this." Amma's voice cracked. "Thank you, ma'am." Claire looked at her tenderly. "Call me Claire." The baby reached out toward Amma, giggling, a sound so pure it seemed to bless the moment itself. Amma stepped into the garden with the morning breeze brushing against her face. The mansion's vast backyard stretched before her, trimmed hedges, white roses, and a marble fountain that whispered softly beneath the sunlight. She had seen it every day, through windows and from a distance, but never like this. Never as someone invited to walk freely among it. In her hands, she still held the letter. The paper trembled slightly, fluttering like the wings of a small bird ready to fly. She read it again, the words, not as staff, but as family, echoing in her mind. For years she had served in homes like this, invisible, replaceable, background to someone else's life. But here, in this quiet bloom of morning light, she felt seen. Claire appeared behind her, barefoot on the grass, carrying the baby who cooed at the sight of the flowers. "He loves it out here," she said softly. Amma smiled, her voice tender. "So did my mother. She said flowers grow better when you talk to them." Claire laughed gently, brushing the baby's hair. "Then maybe that's why ours never do. No one's had anything kind to say lately." Daniel joined them moments later, sleeves rolled up, holding a cup of coffee. Not the distant, hurried man he once was, but someone softer, someone present. "Seems like the garden's finally alive again," he said, smiling at the two women. Amma glanced around, sunlight flickering through leaves, laughter mingling with the sound of the fountain. It felt like something sacred had found its way back into this home. Not wealth or comfort, but warmth. For the first time in years, she wasn't standing on the outside of someone else's happiness. She was part of it. She looked down at the baby, who smiled up at her, tiny fingers reaching for her hand. And in that moment, she realized love could rebuild even the coldest walls. Later that afternoon, as golden light poured into the servants' hallway, now hers alone, Amma found a small envelope slipped under her door. It bore her name in familiar, uneven handwriting. Her heart skipped. It had been months since she'd heard from anyone back home. She sat on the edge of her bed, the same small space that now felt transformed, and unfolded the letter with careful fingers. The paper smelled faintly of rain and dust, of the world she'd left behind. "My dear Amma, we miss you. The roof leaks again, but your sister is growing strong. Mama says she prays for you every night. She asks if the people you work for are kind. I tell her yes, because you have always had a light around you, I hope they see it too." The words blurred as her eyes filled. She pressed the letter to her heart, overwhelmed by the collision of two worlds, one of humble beginnings, the other of marble floors and whispered dinners. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Daniel stood in the doorway, holding a basket of fresh lilies from the garden. "Claire said these were your favorite," he said quietly. Amma smiled, brushing away a tear. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. His eyes caught the open letter. "From home?" She nodded. "Yes. They ask if I'm happy." He stepped closer, his voice low. "And are you?" Amma looked around, the sunlight streaming across the floor, the laughter of the baby echoing faintly down the hall. She took a deep breath. "I think, for the first time, I'm learning what that means." Daniel smiled softly, setting the flowers on her table. "Then I guess we're all learning." As he left, Amma held the letter again, whispering a silent promise that she'd never forget where she came from, even as she learned where she truly belonged. The sun dipped low, painting the mansion halls in amber and shadow. Amma stood at the window of her small room, staring at the letter from home. The words replayed in her mind. "The roof leaks again. Mama prays for you every night." Each line pulled her back across oceans and memories, to the home that had shaped her, to faces she hadn't seen in years. Downstairs, she could hear the gentle murmur of laughter. Daniel, Claire, and the baby gathered for dinner. It was the kind of sound she once only served, never shared. Now, it filled her heart with warmth and guilt all at once. When Daniel knocked softly and stepped in, she already knew what he'd come to say. "Claire and I were talking," he began. "You've done more for this family than we can ever repay. But I saw your face when you read that letter." Amma turned to him, trying to smile. "They need me. My mother's old, my sister's still in school. I came here to build a better life for them. I didn't think I'd find—" She hesitated, searching for the word. "Family here." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And now you have two." The baby's laughter echoed faintly from the dining room, and Amma felt tears sting her eyes. "If I go, he won't remember me," she whispered. "He will," Daniel said softly. "Because love leaves a mark, Amma, even when people forget faces." She turned back to the window, watching the first stars appear. "I just don't know where I belong anymore." He stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on the doorframe. "Maybe belonging isn't a place," he said. "Maybe it's the people you carry with you." The moment lingered, two worlds colliding in silence, and for the first time, Amma realized that every choice she made would carry both of them within it. The dining room glowed under a crystal chandelier, its light scattering like shards of starlight across polished glass and silver. The air smelled of rosemary, baked bread, and the bittersweet stillness of something ending. Claire sat at the far end of the table, the baby in her arms. Daniel poured wine but didn't drink. Amma, for the first time, sat with them, not serving, not waiting, simply there. The clinking of cutlery filled the silence until Claire finally spoke. "Daniel told me you might leave." Her tone wasn't sharp, just heavy with the weight of unspoken emotion. Amma nodded slowly. "My family needs me, ma'am. My mother's not well, and my sister, she depends on me." Claire looked down at the baby, who reached toward Amma with a tiny giggle. "He'll miss you," she said quietly. Amma smiled, her heart tightening. "I'll miss him, too, more than he'll ever know." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes gentle but resolute. "You've changed this home, Amma. You've given us something money couldn't buy. If you go, I won't stop you. But I want you to know this will always be your home, too." Amma's throat tightened. She had spent her whole life trying to earn belonging, and now, when she finally had it, she had to walk away. Claire reached across the table, taking Amma's hand. "You gave my son a mother's touch when I couldn't. You reminded me what love looks like. So if you have to go, go knowing you've left something beautiful behind." Amma couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision as laughter and warmth filled the spaces that used to feel cold. For one night, they weren't billionaire and maid, employer and servant. They were family, bound not by blood or title, but by love and the strange healing grace of forgiveness. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting the marble floor in shades of gold. The mansion was unusually quiet, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Amma stood by the grand staircase, her modest suitcase beside her, the baby's soft laughter echoing faintly from upstairs. Every sound felt like a memory already fading. Claire came down first, her silk robe whispering against the steps. She looked calm, but her eyes were red. "I packed you some things," she said, handing Amma a small wrapped bundle. "Just something to remind you of us." Amma hesitated before taking it. Inside, she could feel the edges of a framed photo. Her, Daniel, and the baby. Taken secretly by the nanny camera the day the baby first laughed in her arms. Her throat tightened as tears slipped down. "Thank you," she whispered. Then came Daniel. He descended slowly, his gaze fixed on her. No words, just the heaviness of understanding. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling. "I was wrong to think I could just let you go." Amma's heart stilled. "But you have a family, sir." "And I have mine," he nodded. "Yes, but family isn't always blood. You became part of ours the moment my son stopped crying in your arms." Before she could reply, the baby's cry rang from upstairs. Instinctively, Amma rushed up, her footsteps echoing in the silent hall. She found him standing in his crib, arms outstretched, tears streaming. She lifted him, his small fingers clutching her hair, the same way he did the first day she comforted him. Downstairs, Claire and Daniel watched as she soothed him. It was clear. This wasn't just goodbye. As Amma turned to leave once more, Claire stopped her at the door. "Don't go yet," she said softly. "Stay until he falls asleep." Amma nodded through her tears, realizing sometimes fate delays endings for the sake of one more miracle. Night had fallen again, quiet and luminous under a silver moon. The house was still except for the rhythmic hum of the baby monitor. Amma sat in the nursery rocking the baby, his eyelids fluttering in dreams. She hummed a soft lullaby from her childhood, a melody her own mother once sang. Each note wrapped the room in peace. Behind her, the door opened quietly. Claire stepped inside, barefoot, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes lingered on the tender scene. The woman who'd once been a stranger now felt like part of the home itself. "He won't sleep for anyone else," she said softly. Amma looked down at the child, smiling faintly. "He knows who loves him." Claire came closer. "That's exactly why I can't let you leave." Amma froze. Her heart stumbled as she turned toward Claire. "Ma'am?" Claire's voice trembled. "Daniel and I talked all night. We realized something. This house was built with money, but it's been empty for years. You brought something real back. You gave this child warmth, laughter, life." She paused, eyes glistening. "We don't want to lose that." Amma blinked back tears. "You want me to stay on as his nanny?" Claire shook her head gently. "Not just as his nanny, as part of this family. You'll have your own place, your own freedom, everything you need. Just don't disappear from his life, or ours." For a long moment, Amma couldn't breathe. Her entire life, all the pain, the loss, the loneliness, collided with this one impossible kindness. She looked at the sleeping baby, his tiny hand curled against her arm. "Why me?" she whispered. Claire smiled sadly. "Because sometimes God sends angels disguised as maids." Amma bowed her head, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like help. She felt like home. The mansion felt heavier that night, like the walls themselves were listening. Amma stood by the nursery window, the baby asleep in his crib, soft moonlight glinting off his tiny fingers. The conversation with Claire replayed in her head, but something in her heart felt unfinished, unsettled. She turned when the door opened. Daniel entered quietly, his face unreadable. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in days. For a long moment he simply stared at the child before whispering, "He looks peaceful when you're here." Amma smiled faintly. "He's growing stronger. You should be proud." Daniel exhaled slowly, walking closer. "I am, but there's something you don't know, Amma. Something I should have said that day I walked in on you." His tone darkened, weighted with guilt. Amma's heart thudded. "What do you mean, sir?" Daniel's gaze fell to the baby. "When I saw you holding him, something in me broke. Not because of what you were doing, but because I knew why you did it. I saw the formula tins in the trash, the doctor's notes Claire had hidden. The truth is," his voice faltered, "my wife couldn't produce milk. Our baby was starving and I didn't even realize it." Amma froze, her eyes widened in disbelief. "You knew?" He nodded. "I confronted her that night." She confessed. "You didn't just save his life. You saved our marriage, our family." Amma stepped back, overwhelmed. "Why tell me now?" "Because I can't let you think you did something wrong. You didn't cross a line. You became his mother when neither of us could." His voice cracked. "And that's a debt I can never repay." Tears blurred Amma's vision. She looked from Daniel to the sleeping child, her heart torn between gratitude and grief. Daniel reached out, his tone soft but certain. "You belong here, Amma. You were meant to be part of this story." For the first time, she believed him. Morning returned, bright and forgiving. The mansion was alive again. Sunlight streamed through the glass atrium, soft piano music floated from the living room, and somewhere upstairs, laughter rippled like a melody. Amma stood at the edge of the garden terrace, dressed simply, her hands resting on the railing as she looked out over the rolling estate. Everything felt surreal. Yesterday, she was a maid preparing to leave. Today, she stood between two worlds, unsure which still belonged to her. Footsteps approached behind her. It was Claire, holding 2 cups of coffee. "He told you everything, didn't he?" she asked quietly. Amma nodded. "He did. I never wanted to come between you two." Claire smiled faintly, setting 1 cup beside her. "You didn't. You reminded us what love is supposed to look like. Selfless, unfiltered, real." She took a breath, her eyes glistening. "We both lost sight of that for too long." Amma looked down, tears warming her cheeks. "I only did what I thought was right for the baby." "And that's why we want you here," Claire said softly. "Not as staff, as family." Before Amma could respond, the baby's joyful shriek echoed through the open doors. Daniel appeared, the child in his arms, giggling, reaching toward Amma. His tiny voice bubbled, "Mama!" The word struck like lightning. Daniel froze. Claire gasped softly. Amma covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Daniel stepped closer, his voice warm but steady. "He's right, you know. You're part of him now." Amma took the baby, holding him close, the morning light catching the tears on her face. For once, she didn't fight the emotion. She smiled through it. The three of them stood together in the garden, framed by sunlight and new beginnings. A billionaire, his wife, and the woman who reminded them what it meant to be human. Sometimes, family isn't written in blood. It's written in sacrifice, kindness, and the courage to love beyond expectation. And in that moment, the mansion finally felt like home.